Cyclone Cheniso is back and likely to rapidly redevelop on tonight's tropical weather bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical weather bulletin for January 24th. So Cheniso is back in the land of the living on the other side of the west coast of Madagascar, now in the Mozambique Channel, where very warm sea surface temperatures will aid it into potentially intensifying quite a great deal in the next few days as it continues southwesterly. First of all though, the Atlantic looks like this, 128 days out from hurricane season, and still nothing to report really. Two little frontal systems there that look rather interesting. The tail end of that eastern one might develop a cyclonic system, but not tropical. In the Australian region, we still have a 20% marked over the Australian top end, and that's going to gradually move westwards, but there's really not much steam left in that one. And moving across the big gulf of the Indian Ocean, there's not much else going on out in the high seas, but towards Madagascar and the western coast particularly, we're under the influence of Cyclone Cheniso. The eastern coast getting quite a bit of convection, but it's more the western coast that's getting still extremely high amounts of rainfall that could be exacerbating flooding issues there right now. It's been perched over Madagascar for almost a week now. I think it's been, well, about 4 days since it made landfall, but it was on approach as well, and it's been dumping extraordinary amounts of rainfall. Let's check the satellite imagery from the last 24 hours. Look out for any red areas. That denotes extremely high rain rates, some of it going off near Australia there, and also bits and pieces around the coast of Madagascar. It's not blowing up huge amount of convection right now, the Cheniso, so we're not really seeing massive amounts of rainfall, but that is expected to increase as the system consolidates again. And here is the progress of that on this latest satellite imagery loop. This is unenhanced infrared. Showing the banding of the system, which extends out in a spiral there all across northern Madagascar, right the way round to northern Mozambique, and even inland towards Malawi there by the looks of things. But the system itself looks to me as though it's getting its act together rather quickly as we look at those latest satellite images, with the convection really hooking around the center once again. I think it's going to be a very short amount of time until it gets back to tropical storm status, and more intensification is possible, with more models getting on board with a significant storm that could actually beat its first peak when it made landfall as a category 1 equivalent when it did so in northern Madagascar. The actual track, it will remain close to the coast for a couple of days before gradually moving towards the southwest and then south as it moves away from Madagascar, and could really ramp up in intensity if at least the GFS is to be believed. We'll take a look at that model run a little bit later on. But back to this imagery that we are looking at. Once again, still watching this loop of the storm tightening up in those last few frames, and here is the enhanced infrared showing how the progress has been from another perspective. We're getting some of the high convection amounts, but really over land areas there we're not seeing very much actually. So only modest amounts of rainfall at the moment, but I expect that will increase as convection starts to ramp up again in the next 24 hours and beyond, all along that western coastline, extending down towards the southwest later on. And you've even got a little bank of convection on the east side as well, and that will persist for a little while longer as well, I expect, before the storm starts to move away a little. It's just due to the storm's quite large influence after its landfall occurred. Let's check those sea surface temperatures then around the world. Look out for temperatures of 80 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. That's 26 to 27 Celsius. The Celsius scale is at the top there, and you can see what it looks like across the East Pacific and the Atlantic. It's only marginal at best in some of those areas, and out towards the Indian Ocean This is what we're looking at there as well. Temperatures up to around 27, maybe 28 degrees. Mozambique Channel though, really primed and ready for very warm conditions, pushing 29, maybe even 30 degrees where Cheniso is for the next few days. Indian Ocean proper, the wide open ocean, still around 27 degrees off the west coast of Australia, still a little bit low, but generally still okay for tropical cyclone development from Exmouth northwards. Across the top end of Australia and those seas there, the Gulf of Carpentaria, temperatures looking good, 29 degrees probably, and in the Coral Sea 28 degrees quite comfortably as well. Around Vanuatu, temperatures are warm there, and around Fiji, particularly to the southeast, temperatures are very warm, 29 to 30 degrees Celsius possibly, and in the Western Pacific we've got a few areas there that are exhibiting warm temperatures as well, particularly in the deep tropics, but extending quite a way north as well, 27 for instance round about Guam there, and in the South China Sea we're looking at around 27 there too. Sea surface temperature anomalies look like this, and they are above average across the Western Pacific. Indian Ocean is hit and miss, but look around the southwestern part of Madagascar, it's above average there as well, and that could be pretty key to how much Cheniso intensifies. Round Fiji is another hot spot to the southeast of there, so let's hope we don't see any storms going in that direction. La Nina still in effect there, but it is loosening its grip. Oceanic heat content down in the South Pacific is still looking fairly decent all the way down to Fiji and beyond towards Tonga. Anything that's in the light blue there towards green and beyond is pretty good. And looking towards the Western Pacific, still that bank of orange there towards the Mariana Islands, so still looking very decent in that area if we see any systems, but still a little bit less so near the southern islands of the Philippines, which are more likely to see a system. Let's check the GFS then over the next few days. Here's what happens. It hugs the coastline and then it really starts to intensify as it continues southwestwards there, starts to get going again and becomes a very powerful storm there, probably category 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. So this is a radical change to what we were looking at a day or two ago, but it was what we were looking at in early revisions of this model, and other models are getting on board with quite a strong storm as well. I think the icon's even stronger actually. And this is the rainfall estimates that we're expecting over the next 7 days, and you can see once again large amounts of rainfall there along that southwesterly region, but also that little pocket there in the far southeast as well, still expecting to get a lot of rain from the storm's outer bands, but looking at rainfall accumulations from this point forward, round about 19-20 inches there, that is over up to 500 millimeters still that could be received on top of what's already been seen across the whole of Madagascar. And even away from that, we're still looking at potentially maybe 8 inches, 200 millimeters for parts of northern Madagascar that have already been inundated with huge amounts of rainfall over the last few days. Projections at one point were going towards 1,100 millimeters. I'm not sure about what's actually occurred down there yet, but it certainly would appear to me as though it would be a massive flooding issue. In the longer range, we're looking towards the North Indian Ocean for a system there. It does spawn a tropical cyclone, day 5 to 10, and it ends up going towards Sri Lanka, pretty normal for a January track. And it can sometimes happen in the North Indian Ocean, but I would be rather guarded as to whether, as to the odds on that. I would still be rather cautious. It's unlikely. We have seen GFS throw up false positives quite a few times in the Indian Ocean, so we'll see. And there's Cheniso once again continuing southeastwards, and it does start to fade away slowly, but it does keep hold of its intensity for a good while. There's its extratropical transition, happens very quickly in the end, then it continues southeastwards, and there's another storm forming there further north into the tropical zone, well out at sea at that point, but towards the end of that 10-day period was that probably into the 1st of February, that system starts to develop and starts to move at west-southwest. And at this point, that's the serious stuff done. Scan the barcode and take a look at the Force 13 merch store, where we have all of our usual items, including the hoodies and all of that stuff, and the pillows, there they are, and the Still Waiting for Hone t-shirt, which is still available, but for how long? And full season and individual storm animations on request. In the Scilly Range, what else happens? Well, there's the progress of that system, and then look northeastwards there towards Indonesia. Two other systems form out of barely anything really, and one of them starts moving towards the southwest. The other system, the initial one there, moving south of the Mascarene Islands, and eventually it does become a nothing storm really. That other system that forms, two systems in that group over there. One heads towards Australia, doesn't make it. The other one there, you can actually see its progress, continues southwesterly and gets stronger towards the end, but that's extremely long range and none of them affect land. And you can join the conversation on Discord, our Force 13 Discord server, where you can join over 3,000 others for tropical weather and general weather chat. discord.gg/Force13. Well, what happened on this day? On January 24th, 1999, we had Cyclone Damien, which was intensifying on this day to become a strong Category 2 storm. It would actually peak right at the end of the day. We had two other systems as well. Olinda, which was moving close to Fiji, if I'm right. They might have even passed there, and Pete, which was not far from New Caledonia, both of them heading towards the southeast as relatively tepid tropical storms. I think they're only low to moderate at peak. But an interesting picture on what the tropics looked like 24 years ago. Well then, back to right now. The first name on the Atlantic naming list when it comes around is Arlene. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Adrian, and in the Central Pacific, the first name of next decade probably at this rate is Hone. In the Western Pacific, we have Sanvu next up. We've been waiting a little while for that one now, and in the North Indian Ocean, it is still Mocha. 5 storms so far on our tally for 2023. The average per year is 92. Last year finished with 93. In the Australian region, next name is Freddie, Southwest Indian Ocean, Dingani, and in the South Pacific, it's Judy. That's all from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back with you tomorrow night.